Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network, a modern, innovative multimedia platform, broadcasting ideas and connecting minds. Every company has a story to tell, from the small startup to the large enterprise, and everything in between. This is one of them. We hope you enjoy this brand story conversation.
And here we are. We are in Black Hat, not in Black, well I guess we are in Black Hat. We're in Las Vegas for Black Hat, Hacker Summer Camp, and loads of research, lots of new technologies and innovations coming to bear, and cool people, cool companies come together and help us all improve our identity and our data and our cloud and all this stuff. And Art, you're walking around out there, I pulled you in and said, let's have a chat. Now, we wanted to follow up, so for everybody who missed it, which is probably one or two people at this point, Art and I had a good chat the other day, and we wanted to continue the conversation, look at things a little more operationally today, and how what Britive does actually fits in and helps cloud and dev and other ops teams do what they need to with respect to identity to achieve the outcomes they want for their business. And so we're going to do that today. Art, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, of course. Anytime for you, Sean.
I love
Great.
it. I love anytime for me. All right, perfect. The elevator pitch for Britive. So I encourage everybody to listen to the conversation, but for setting the stage today, quick rundown of what Britive does for folks.
Yeah, Britive is a cloud privileged access management platform. What that means is essentially we help organizations, typically medium and large enterprise organizations, tackle the identity problems and identity security issues in the cloud, as well as hybrid on-prem type of environments, which is very common today.
And we'll get into the fact that it isn't all just cloud, right? Some haven't moved to the cloud yet. Some have moved and moved back some things to the cloud. So there's a lot of shifting and whatnot going on there. But when we look at some of the challenges, and we're going to touch on some of the use cases and case studies that you've put together over the years. What are some of the challenges early on that organizations were facing that existing technologies then just you couldn't you might lift and shift your stack to the cloud, but not all the other stuff, not the tech, the security tech did not naturally lift and shift. So tell us a little bit about some of those challenges that companies faced.
Yeah, very true. Lift and shift may have worked in the early stages of cloud adoption, but it's very quickly becoming impossible to do, and there's a lot of learnings from that organizations have from their experience. Now, challenges, what they were trying to tackle, and specifically from security and identity standpoint, are different than those from the data center world. To name one example, there's a lot of new processes and workflows and tooling that was introduced with adoption of public cloud, for example. AWS, GCP, Azure, DevOps teams use a number of different tools to automate their workflows and processes, like application development and deployment, like CI/CD pipelines, common names like Terraform, GitHub, and so on. And all that is very different from how access was done in the data center world, which now created the big challenge of how to do it for this environment, for this type of new environments, for what teams and what are their needs and requirements. And very often organizations run into this conflict almost to have to support the agility and the speed of cloud-based development, yet insert security controls and be able to track and monitor these environments like they used to in the data center world. And that has been a very difficult challenge to address because of the inherent conflict. When you introduce security, things slow down, and the cloud doesn't like it. And given that cloud is very dynamic, it changes much more often than you would expect in an on-prem environment. It complicates things. So that's how cloud, like one example, how it's different.
And forgive me for not knowing, and maybe you can help educate me as well as the audience, but there might be some similarities in the Microsoft on-prem world to cloud with Azure and Azure AD. But I'm sure there are changes there too that aren't easy to handle when you're building new stuff. But when you talk about other clouds, we talk hybrid cloud, but certainly multi-cloud. Some people run stuff in GCP, some are in Azure, some on AWS for different reasons. Maybe acquisition or workloads run better in those for some reasons. How does identity kind of work in those environments? And sure, let's go ahead and toss in the fact that there's still legacy stuff with on-prem identities in place, right? So talk to me about that, what that world looks like from a security perspective and a dev perspective as things are getting built and stood up.
There's a couple of different things to unpack in that, really. And the first one would be from a major cloud provider standpoint, like Microsoft, who has historically been very dominant in the enterprise space and has also products like identity management products built in, very popular technology like Active Directory and so on. Now, when you look at the cloud side of the stack that Microsoft has, yes, there's a lot of great tools and technologies, but still, it's mostly for Microsoft stack. Arguably, there's a few that support other technologies, and it's kind of the dilemma for every organization where they have a major provider like Microsoft, but they also have other technologies that they have to support. And that's where the cloud landscape is very challenging, that they all have, like GCP has a very different identity access management native stack, if you will. And the tooling, the maturity level is different than, say, Microsoft or AWS. For an organization to be able to manage that across these environments, and I just gave you 3 major infrastructure examples. Now, their world is not just infrastructure. There's Snowflake, there's Salesforce, there's all kinds of other new technologies, right? How do they manage those in a kind of a unified fashion and be able to consistently implement identity and access management controls and processes? It's very difficult. And that's what identity is all about. You can't really just have one system per application or per platform identity management system.
Right.
You have to have something that works for the landscape.
Beyond managing the identity, because there's also access and the rights that you have to do certain things. Does that just add a whole another level of complexity to the mix?
A great observation, Sean. Every time we speak, I'm impressed how much you know about this.
I pretend to know something.
No, but the truth is this, right? You have identity is very multi-layered. And it's so true when it comes to something like what we call the privileged identities, right? And it's a very broad term if you think about it. But what it really means is access is not binary, like you have it or you don't. You always have access, but the levels determine what you can do. This is the part that, especially in the modern new technologies, makes a whole lot of difference. Previously, if they were thinking about, authentication is access, essentially. Identity authenticates to a system or application, access granted, great, do what you need to do. What we're learning very quickly in the new modern world, especially with things like automated processes, LLMs, RPAs and API-based workload, all these things require a different level of access. On the human side, you have software engineer that requires different level of access than the infrastructure operations team, right? So you have to really treat access like it is a multi-layered access, and provision, deprovision properly, and secure that level properly. It's not just about just add a multi-factor authentication and you're done.
Yeah. So of course you need to understand what you want to do so that you can then do it. So what is acceptable use? When does that apply, and how do I create my policies to do that? And I presume you help with a lot of that stuff, right?
We help with that, yes, of course. Let me actually even add one more thing.
Okay.
Again, in the cloud world, things are actually a little bit worse in the sense that there's even a fundamental challenge in having visibility to who has what access where. On the on-prem side, this has been mostly sold with tools like IGA, for example, Identity Governance and Administration. Now, cloud side, you start there. First of all, what do you have? Who has what? Is this justified or not? So we help with that discovery. First, look at what you have as is, understand the risk exposure, the risk posture based on that, and then make the right decisions, or more the informed decisions about what identities require what level of access. We help also with defining the new level of access and implementing that on a essentially ongoing basis. So through Britive, for our platform, users will have the opportunity to elevate their access or be granted specific levels, like I was talking about earlier. Let's say you're a storage administration, AWS. That's the only access you'll get when you come through Britive and you prove to Britive that you're a trusted identity and that you were authorized for that level, and off they go do their thing, and we make sure we automatically remove that access after that each session. That helps reduce the risk or the exposure because of standing access.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the challenge, especially when we're talking about policies, it can be about any policy, but certainly around access, identities and access, we tend to we don't want to deal with multiple requests. So we set the greatest level, thinking, they're going to ask for it at some point, let's just give it to them. And then they need a little more, and we grant that, and then they shift roles, so we add more to that. And we tend to not remove the access and then the rights that they have to things. And I guess my point is, it continues to grow, but I guess the other point is, the reason we do that is because of the exceptions. This is my understanding is dev needs dev access. But there's that one moment in time where they can only troubleshoot and decode in prod, right?
Yep.
And they get access to prod, and then guess what? They live with prod for forever. As an engineer, I remember, just give me access to prod, it'll be fine.
Yep.
So it's about managing exceptions and dealing with that at scale, so we grant everything and just let things continue to grow out of hand.
Sean, the problem you're highlighting is so fundamental to why Britive exists. From my standpoint, you hit the nail in the head. Because yes, you when you're dealing with access and management, there's always implications when access is not granted on time. That's why things were done like you described. Developers asking for production access, we better give it to them right now because they're troubleshooting a very important application, or valuable application, right? So that's why we're here in this situation. Now, from Britive's standpoint, how we decided to tackle that problem is to say, okay, we understand the business is always going to have that need, or the developers, whoever we're looking at for access requests, right? You have to give them something that they need at the time so that they can address the need. How do we make sure that A, that access doesn't stay there when it's not needed, and B, how to make it easy yet secure and compliant for getting that access? These are the things that in the existing products, it was maybe addressed for one part of it only. Just give them access. Yes, they go through approval, they get it, but to your point, that access remains after they don't need it anymore. Yep. And that's how we approach this from the product and technology standpoint, so we can make it easier And two concepts here. Pre-authorized. If your job requires occasionally to have production access for troubleshooting, you're authorized for that, but you don't have that access. You still have to invoke, activate when you need it. If there's a justified reason, like you have a service desk ticket,
Right.
sure, we can go off of that to make sure that that's a legitimate reason for you to have that production access. And second important concept, we give it for only a set amount of time to perform the task, and then we take it away automatically. No user will remember to go and say, I don't need this access anymore, or maybe they just don't want to give up that access, right? But we make sure automatically that gets expired, eliminated from the environment. So there's no need to go every quarter, bring in a lot of data and start doing reviews to find, the unauthorized access.
So talk to me about the onboarding. I think you have a customer that you have a good example to share for this, where things may have taken a long time to do, that now are pretty streamlined.
Every customer wants to know, okay, great, this sounds really great. It almost too good to be true. Some proof points. Have others done this? Of course. And we're very fortunate to work with a lot of great, companies, organizations, Fortune 100, other, enterprise organizations, and they have all been at different stages of their cloud journey, multi-cloud, hybrid environments. Some of the proof points that we have seen consistently is how our technology helps reduce the amount of time that it takes for users to get what they need. And some examples I can quote here from customers is a typical onboarding time for a DevOps engineer used to take minimum of 3 days. Often is about a week long or more process.
It's a lot of training
once
before
deployed,
they actually start doing.
Once Britive is
they're sitting in training classes.
like
until
there's
they get
very
access.
expensive resources for the business. Like once Britive is deployed, that the process is almost entirely automated. How they get onboarded and their access provision, and we've seen on average about 30 minutes. So we go from minimum of 3 days, sometimes a week-long process, to about 30 minutes. That's all because of the integration and the automation workflows.
And it doesn't matter which cloud, if it's on-prem or hybrid or any of that?
Not really, because the onboarding process really is where the time, the consumption is creating access in GCP, creating access in Azure, in Snowflake, and so on. When we have it all integrated, and the identity is mapped to specifically an access that already exists defined in Britive, it literally becomes a matter of like data synchronization from your HR system or from your identity provider, like, I don't know, Azure directory, if you're using that. So it becomes much more simplified and streamlined process. The second good example of proof point is, of course, the security teams want to see what Britive does for them, for the security teams and CISOs especially. What Britive does for the security teams, what the value for them is massive reduction of the risk, what we call the risk of standing overprivileged identities and credentials. And what that means is anytime a customer deploys Britive in even like one major cloud environment like AWS, we see the number of standing privileges that are in the environment at a given point in time to go from something like 30,000 down to nothing standing or minimal for only exceptional cases. That's a massive security risk reduction. If you even just look at the size and the scale of that 30,000 privileged roles, groups, and so on, that at any point in time are a target by cyber
very
criminals,
common successful targets.
And when you extrapolate it to the entire landscape, including infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, applications, data, hybrid environments, that is a tremendous sort of risk reduction. So CISOs love that
absolutely.
story. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're coming up on the end here. So final question is, how does this fit into a current security program? How would a CISO strategize and pull Britive into the mix?
Today, how we see sort of organizations think about risk reduction generally across the cloud and non-cloud environments, we often hear the zero trust security initiatives, right? Or sometimes more specifically, it's identity security initiative.
Okay.
To be able to, implement new controls, new technologies and processes in order to eliminate that risk or reduce as much as possible. So we align very well with that. Let's take zero trust, for example, with that priority of the organization, because as I was describing, our technology, it's built to eliminate standing risk. So it's a very natural fit with any other broader zero trust security initiatives. Identity security is kind of I would say is a specific example of how zero trust can be implemented for identity. There's a term in the identity space, a relatively newer term, it's called zero standing access.
Okay.
To directly correlate zero trust and zero standing identity and access to make sure that there's alignment between the identity program and the zero trust security program. So cool. ZSPS, it's called zero standing privileges. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Art, it's always a good time chatting with you, and pleasure to see you here in Vegas. It's been a while since we saw each other person. We did the last one online, which is still fun. Great chat, and I encourage everybody to listen to that. It's the origin story and more about Britive and why and how you founded the company, and it's an amazing story, so I encourage everybody to listen to that. More importantly, connect and talk to Art. You have a ZTNA or a ZPSA or whatever the zero SPAM, I don't know, whatever it was. A program where you need to reduce the risk in your identity management. Talk to Art and the Britive team, and they'll help you sort through that and keep your programs running agilely and get the outcomes you need for the business without security getting in the way.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, and thanks everybody for listening and watching. Appreciate you enjoying this brand story with Britive and Art, and stay tuned for more from Black Hat.
Thank you, Sean.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and that you will come back for more brand stories on ITSP Magazine. If you want to share your company's brand story, go to itspmagazine.com and explore our advertising options to learn more. Remember to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues, and stay tuned for more brand stories as we continue our journey toward redefining cybersecurity, technology, and society.